Hello everyone, welcome to Dinosaur Discovery. I'm Wayne Hall, and this is Peter Beach. We have spent together probably about 4 expeditions to Okanagan Lake, and today we're going to tell you about our experiences. So, Pete, how did you get involved? Because obviously you beat me there. You went up there one expedition ahead of me, so how'd that materialize?
Well, a fella I met at, young fella I met at a conference, I introduced himself as Philip O'Donnell, and he was interested in doing some of the kind of research that we do. Uh, I'd been to Africa, and he knew about that, and because of that, he thought I was some sort of an expert. But we got to talking about things that he would like to do, and he couldn't afford to go to Africa, as many people can't. But he was interested in going up to Lake Okanagan because he'd heard that there was a lake monster there, something called Ogopogo. I wasn't all that interested in it, but he seemed so enthusiastic. I said, well, if you can get us a boat or, make some arrangements, sure, I'll go with you. Well, he did. This is a 16-year-old kid who talked a full-grown man into letting us have his boat in Renton, Washington, a man that Philip didn't know, and I certainly didn't know. We ended up with his boat that we hauled up to Lake Okanagan in my little Toyota Corolla, So that was my first experience up there. We went up to the north end of the lake and we looked for baby things, and all we saw were beavers basically and fish. But that was my introduction to it, and from that point on, others found out that we were doing that sort of thing up there, and I think that's about when you got involved.
Yes, well, if I understand correctly, Philip O'Donnell got in touch with Arlene Gall, and you're able to visit her, right?
Right.
Yes.
I did that first time.
Yes, so anyhow.
We also met the Novaks.
Yes, I was going to mention that too.
Go ahead.
Philip first got a hold of Novaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I kind of got introduced to the Novaks through Philip.
Okay.
So you can kind of see how you just follow the trail and it all ends up with Philip O'Donnell just can't take no for an answer.
Yeah. He's a go-getter.
Yeah. And to you people out there who are go-getters, we want your type to go out there and find these animals too.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why we're putting together a video tutorial on the Field Expedition Guide for Beginners. And we'll give you all the ammunition you need to go out and do a good expedition and to avoid some bad practices. Yeah, learn from our mistakes. So we made some mistakes during these expeditions too. So, with that being said, Pete, so I approached you with the idea of going up to Okanagan Lake, and obviously you didn't learn your lesson since last time. What was kind of like the mentality behind it? I mean, I was more involved with let's go up there and see if we can get footage up there for a documentary. I was in documentary mode. I was working on the video In Search of the Congo Dinosaur about that time. Basically, I was looking for footage. I didn't know if I was going to find the creature or not, but I was definitely out to get footage, at least of the area. Mm-hmm. So I set up trying to do like an interview with Arlene Gall, and it was able to materialize. She gave us kind of like a day of what will work for her. I contacted a campsite, and we were able to get reservations made, and then I just kind of went to Pete, and I brought it all up to him. And what'd you think at first?
Well, it was like every expedition. You have your plan, and then the plan falls apart. So then you're trying to make things work from that point on. That's pretty much the way these things work. But I do remember that I had an idea that we'd like to go out to Rattlesnake Island.
Oh, yes.
Also known as Ogopogo Island. This was purportedly a place where the Indians, the native people who live up there, had seen this animal. Myth, stories, legends. But it sounded interesting, and I told him that I would like to, if we could, go out there to that island. And you had some rubber boats, and so that's how we got the rubber boats.
Yeah, so actually, what I was thinking, it'd be great if we had like a motorboat. And Raphael, who I was corresponding with at the time, said, no, you probably should have a motorboat. It's like the safest thing to take out there, you know. Mm-hmm. And, well, once we got there, we started looking for motorboats. And that's where our plan got shot down, is because all the motorboats there were expensive. I mean, really expensive. And they were not geared for field research. They're pleasure boats. They're playthings. I found out the hard way that Okanagan Lake is basically the gigantic playground of like the whole British Columbia. You have all sorts of boat traffic and stuff like that. And it's a tourist-based society. And some of the animals there are tame enough to eat out of your hand. Well, go further up north, you'll have animals that are ready to eat you. So that's the difference. You know, the whole Okanagan area is pretty tame, you might say.
It is.
So, anyhow, so we got up there. We spent the night at that campground. And, I'd like to say on camera, not to fault anyone in particular, but if you're choosing a campground for yourself, not all campgrounds are created equal. The campground we chose, even though it's close nearby the lake, it was not ideal. So be picky about what you're going to choose. And it was not really a great campground. We spent one night there and pretty much called it quits after that. But then we went to visit Mrs. Gall, and we had a very constructive interview, don't you say?
And I think you just put that up on the YouTube.
Yes,
on our channel.
That's right. And you can go check that out for yourselves. We have the whole thing up there. So, anyhow, that's linked in the description box below at the end of this video, so you can go check it out. And what do we do then?
Well, I think we did a few things, but the thing I'm most interested in was our trip over to Rattlesnake Island.
Well, before, I don't want to get the cart before the horse, but we did go up to Okanagan Center. And that's where we basically stationed out our first observational location. And I seen something there that I'm not 100% certain if it's an Ogopogo sighting or not. I could be having Ogopogos coming out of my head at this point. We just finished interviewing Arlen Gall. We went up there and we staked out. But it was getting close toward dusk. It was almost drawing toward nighttime, and that's when I was looking out on the lake and I saw almost like something like a slight beaver head or something like that, just sticking slightly out of the water. And at the time I just had my field glasses with me. And through the field glasses I could see it is going back down, and it left a little bit of a ripple behind. It could have been a beaver, I don't know.
How big was it?
It had a head that felt like so.
Okay.
It might have been one, but it could be just a tip of who knows what.
Pretty big beaver.
Perhaps it could have been Ogopogo, but then again, it's not definitive, you know. I'm not going to go out and say I had a definite sighting.
About how far out of the water was it?
It was about yay so.
And how far away were you?
We were about somewhere between 400 and 500 feet from where we were at the vantage point.
Okay, so about a block and a half, 2 blocks away.
Yeah, and I saw it all through the binoculars. If you probably saw it with like your regular eyes, you wouldn't be able to get as much detail out of it.
Sure.
more on that later. So, anyhow, we spent the night there, and in the morning, we decided to go to Peachland and look for a parking spot, and pretty much we made up our minds we're just going to row across in those rubber rafts that I brought along with us. So I want to kind of fill in from there on how that went.
Well, you know, small rubber boats are fine for recreation. Rowing 2 miles over a lake works fine if the weather's good, and we were lucky. We were able to get over there, and there weren't waves or wind. We're just plain lucky. We came in from the south side of the island, and there's a channel. This kind of shows a picture.
Yeah.
In fact, I drew this from a picture just to give you the proper perspective. And so we came up through the channel from the south going
Yes.
north.
If I would interject, actually, it was all good at first, but by the time we got there to the island, waves were starting to kick up and a storm was coming through. And I found a spot where we can land, but it wasn't a very good spot. It wasn't a good spot to leave the boats there and all that. And Pete told me, saying, you go ahead, take some of the cameras and the media equipment, go up to the top, get set up. I'll row the boats around the bend, and we have a much better spot.
Yeah.
So, want to tell them what happened there?
Well, this side of the island is rather sheer, like so. And this side, this is the mainland, and it's rather sharply. So what we have here is a U-shaped basin between the island and the mainland. And we had to crawl up this, almost like crawling up the side of a mountain. But we found that when we got on top, there was a space on the other side of the island on the north end that was rather shallow.
Yes, that's a good spot to keep the boats.
So we could take the boats there. I decided to go down, get in the rubber boats, and haul the rubber boats over there with us. We didn't need both of us to go over there. So I got down there. It was about dusk. There's mountains over here, and the mountains, the sun had gone below the mountains, so it was just starting to get like twilight, even though it wasn't twilight time, because we've sit in a basin. It was getting darker, and at the point that, well, it wasn't great viewing for anything out on the lake, but you could see 20, 30, 50 yards. You could see 100 yards, pretty good. Well, at any rate, I got in the boat, and I tied the boats together, and as I started rowing up the channel, going north, I stopped because I saw this thing out of the water, and it was perhaps 2 feet out of the water, maybe 2.5. It was perhaps about a foot wide, and it had kind of like a bowler hat on top. There were no features to it because of the amount of light. It was just sort of featureless. The animal was probably dark colored, but it was definitely an animal of some sort. It wasn't a log, it wasn't an apparition or a reflection. There were reflections, like I drew here. This, whatever it was just out of the water, and I just froze. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I certainly didn't want to row right into it. So I just stayed there, and I was there perhaps, you can think 15 seconds, something like that, and then it went down. Well, your mind doesn't compute everything. You were just through a situation, and I didn't know what exactly to think about what I just saw. I knew I'd seen it. I knew it was imprinted in my mind. That's why we have a picture here. I could show you exactly where it occurred, but on the other hand, I couldn't tell you exactly what it was either. At any rate, I rode around to the other side, took the boats out. Wayne was doing his thing, taking pictures, making observations, and so forth, and I couldn't tell him anything. I didn't tell him anything. I'd just seen this thing, and I didn't know what to do with it.
Well, to be completely fair about it, Pete, I wasn't really too vocal about what I seen that same, well, actually, the day before. I wasn't really too vocal about that either, because we're kind of like, if we're going to see these creatures, we expect for them to have like a bulbous body showing, like a head and neck coming out, something that you would expect from Loch Ness. We expected something more like that. We're not just expecting this like head-like thing coming out. And our mentality was prepare for the storm that's coming on up. I had the cameras.
yeah. Got to protect those.
Yeah, get those up there, and watch out, Wayne. Look for this creature. And meanwhile, I'm gonna have a sighting quietly and not tell you about it until later.
And then I remember setting up the tent, sort of on the top. Not a bright place to put it, but I did. It wasn't that bad. It was a little windy. And then the storm blew in. Mm-hmm. And this was almost tornado. And the tent was a small tent. It's a one-man tent that you can put two people in if you're, real cozy type. And it was so much windy that the tent started to act like a kite.
Yeah, that's right.
So we collapsed the tent, just pulled the legs out from under the tent went down, and just blew the heck out of everything for, I don't know, what would you say?
Oh, a couple hours maybe?
Yeah.
No, maybe less than that. I don't entirely remember that. I just know it was kind of scary, and I was worried about the boats.
Yeah.
I would hate to go down to the shoreline and the boats are gone. That was on my mind.
Well, when I tied the boats up, I found things that weren't going to move, but I mean, it could have torn up the boats, to tell you the truth, but it didn't.
So we got lucky.
Yeah.
In the morning, the storm was gone. Everything was quite clear and all that. It was actually good observation. Mm-hmm. And Pete slept in and I did the field research. It's all right. It's all right. And after that, we were able to row back to shore, and it was a very nice day for that. It was like pristine. We almost took our time getting on back. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started observing all these dead fish in the water. Like there's a bunch it wasn't a whole bunch in one spot. There was one over here, there's one over there, And I took pictures of that and I reported that to Raphael when we met them, and that did seem to perturb him a little bit.
Tell him about our next thing. We went to the Novaks for a meal.
That's right. We went to the Novaks and had like a very good visit with them. And I don't remember whether or not we first went to them and had like a meal with them, or if we first went on a research expedition, because we did go to Mission Creek.
Right.
We went to Mission Creek area with the boats, again with the rubber rafts, and we set up there, and they came by with their little motorboat, and they were doing a sound test, seeing if certain sounds would bring Ogopogo around, and no, we didn't have the underwater camera yet. He had like an underwater camera system of his own, I believe, and they were basically using that, and they saw like a fish or two or something like that. So in short, it was basically nothing out of the ordinary was observed, and the truth of it is that, yeah, we have some extraordinary events like Pete's sighting in the channel and my own who knows what type sighting, and that wasn't anything really to get excited about to me personally. But the fact is, we observed the ordinary a lot. Like we saw formations of Canadian geese, we saw some ducks, we saw a whole bunch of boat wakes, and there we just saw maybe deer on the shoreline and stuff like that. So to people out there who expects to go to Okanagan Lake, say, okay, here I am, where's Ogopogo? It's not going to do that for you.
No.
These sightings are fairly rare. It's like kind of winning the lottery, as Arlene Gall put it.
Yeah. And it was, I would just say, quite by accident. I mean, to end up 50 feet from that was just luck.
Yeah, and during that time, you kind of conveyed to the Novaks about what you had seen.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No, the first thing I said to them, I said, I talked to them before.
Yeah.
Okay, and when I talked to them before, they were telling me about a sighting they had off their deck because they lived on the lake. They were looking down at the lake from a nice vantage point.
Yeah.
And they had a sighting of Ogopogo, and they described it as something long, but that it had a bulbous head, and that when the head came up, Mr. Novak said it had it was like this with kind of a thing like this at the top, and I just kind of like a shiver went down my back, and I said I saw the same thing.
It's kind of like this on the picture.
Yeah, like that. It was at that point it all galvanized. It was quite a moment to realize that, wow, this really was something. Mrs. Novak, when they had their sighting, described the animal as having a small appendage on its side, like an arm, with what she described as a hand, something that you might see from a child or a woman, a small hand. And I mean, that sounds strange. I know it. It's hard to believe, but there are animals that might fit this description. Go ahead.
Well, basically, after that visit, that's when you decide to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll be fair with it. At first, I was just slightly put off. Slightly, but I am quick to forgive. But actually, to be fair about it, he had no idea what he saw. And he was kind of... Well, when you have a sighting, you're kind of defensive about that sighting. You just don't want to run around to everyone saying, hey, I've seen this, or hey, I've seen that. It's not in our nature to go around doing that, and if it is, I kind of worry about that person. Like, you need to have some discretion first. It's after you realize the fact that what you saw was more like the real deal, like you eliminated any sort of possible explanations as we come out and mention it. I mean...
How embarrassing is it to say you had a sighting and the fellow says, well, it was a duck.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
yeah.
You just, all credibility is shot.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we observed a lot of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So if you do have a sighting on there and you're not sure what you've seen, I would say go ahead and document what you see and then go about searching to disprove it. I'm not saying fabricate something in your own mind to disprove it. I'm talking about view boat wakes, view formations of geese, view the ordinary. And when you have eliminated all possible explanations, then you say, well, that could be Ogopogo, you know?
Yeah. We saw all sorts of wave types, boat waves, reflected waves, waves that affected other waves that had, shapes and sizes that were odd. You get enough boats in one area, you're going to get a lot of odd-shaped waves.
Yeah.
We've learned that this is nothing. We discount them. Even if it was an Ogopogo by chance, how can you say anything about it? You saw a wave. That's basically the way we look at it.
The last to our final day of the expedition, we decided to go up to Trepaniker Bench Road. And that's where we were actually looking for different spots to do vantage point observation. We don't like sitting just on the shore of the lake with the cameras. We want to try to get high above the water, looking down. The reason for that is that we can get more detail. And an aerial view is much better than just on the surface type view. But anyhow, when we got to Trepaniker Bench Road, I happened to notice some rather unusual wave formations out there. And I said, oh, let's just go ahead and film it just for the sake of it. And so I grabbed like the little handheld camcorder that we're using to film this film right now. But anyhow, I was trying to view it with that, and it was really hard to hold it steady when it was zoomed out all the way. And I decided, this needs to be on the tripod. It seems consistent. This is worthwhile to pursue. So I stopped the camera. I stopped the camera like an idiot to go get the tripod. And when I finally dragged out the tripod, Pete said, never mind, I went back down. So the lessons learned on this is if you see something, keep on filming until it goes away. Don't just stop to get something better. If anything, I should have perhaps handed the camera to Pete saying, hold on to this, or Pete, you go get me the tripod.
Yeah.
Always keep on recording, even if it is all over the place. And it is so easy to do with a camcorder.
I would say in general, our experiences with Ogopogo is 15 seconds. It's going to be a long time. That's about what you got. If you pick it up and it's already been there, you've got 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, it's going away.
Yeah. So what do we do with this footage? It's unusual footage. So I basically waited till the following day, and we showed that to the Novaks. We went to church with them, and afterwards we showed them footage of that. And Raphael actually got pretty excited over that. And it'll be on this video too that you can watch. But the main thing that concerns me about it is that there's boats in the area. It could have been a result of different boat wakes meeting and meshing with the waves together and produce some sort of effect that resembles something up out of the water. Mm-hmm. So I needed to go get a neutral opinion, get someone that's neutral. Isn't going to be Mr. Skeptic that dismisses everything, and at the same time isn't a wide-eyed believer that will take anything you throw at them and say, oh yes, that's it. So I got a hold of a gentleman and asked if he could, or basically investigate it. And I gave him as much information I could about where we were, some of Google Earth image, where approximately it was. And he basically sent back the phenomena as being, well, it could have been the creature, or it could have just been a boat wake. Whatever it was, it did not break the surface. So it's basically surface phenomenon. So, did we have proof of Ogopogo's existence? I have to say no.
Yeah, nothing definitive.
Nothing definitive, nothing that we can up and say we have proof.
No.
But we did our part,
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find Ogopogo by sitting back in an armchair and saying, I don't believe these creatures exist.
And we did make some headway. We know when, what time of year, what day. We know what the weather was like. We all write this. Mm-hmm. We write these things down. The time of day, very important. It's not in bright daylight. You find these things when the light is going down or the light is coming up, the sun.
Yeah, that's where we basically formulated the procedure for lake investigations for future expeditions, where the morning you get up early and you go to the vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
The evening time, when it's starting to come late afternoon, early evening, you go to a vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the golden times that you need to be out there. Other times of the day you can kind of do kind of whatever, but always have a camera available you can grab and film something if you see something out there.
Start out with wide angle and then zoom in,
Yes.
rather than the opposite.
Oh, that's a horrible practice because you're trying to search for it.
Right. You want to give perspective as much as you possibly can. We
Yes.
don't want to be focusing in on a little, very small object where you can't get perspective.
Yes, yes. And that's why we talked about in the field guide on cameras, the importance of having a start off at a wide angle lens and zoom on in into the object, because we can get from those frames where you were and get a good sense of positioning and such.
Yeah, when you zoom too, go to a point where the wiggle is not too much. If you go too far, it gets so wiggly it's out of frame. So there's some happy medium.
Yeah. So that was basically our expedition in a nutshell.
Yep.
So, and you think that we learned our lesson by then, but we actually did a total of 4 expeditions. So we obviously didn't learn our lesson from last time.
And we'll be going for a 5th, hopefully this year.
Hopefully. We'll see what happens.
Yep.
All right. So, before I forget, to all those who want to learn more about expeditions and so forth, they can go to animaldiscovery.org, or you can also check out our YouTube channel, which is called Dinosaur Discovery. So, these 2 organizations work in cooperation with one another. So, anyhow, if you have any questions, feel free to send them to Animal Discovery. Pete's a board member of that. So, anyhow, until next time, have a nice day.